Hello, good evening, and welcome to our Science and Religion Digital Dialogue series that we have here at the Methodist Theological School in Ohio. As you well know, this series is part of a grant that is made possible through the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion program. AAAS partners with the Association of Theological Schools, of which MTSO is a member, and provides these resources to integrate science into coursework and campus events. This grant is also funded by the John Templeton Foundation. And now, without further ado, we are going to get to this topic all about waste. And I am so excited about it. I hope that all of you are too that have come to this event. As you know, our modern economy produces millions of tons of human waste that piles up in landfills, water bodies, and city streets. And how should we be responding to this? Well, we have a panel of experts that are really going to help us sort through what we should be doing in terms of waste. And I'm going to introduce our panelists. First, we have Sarah Nahar, who is a Ph.D. candidate at Syracuse University. She holds a Master's of Divinity degree from Anabaptist Mennonite Biblical Seminary in her hometown of Elkhart, Indiana, which is traditional Potawatomi land. I said that wrong. Her research addresses sanitation as an ethical issue and offers defecatory justice as a framework to analyze the power dynamics at play when addressing the climate issues created by dominionism. We also have Dr. Marc Deshusses, a professor of civil and environmental engineering at Duke University, where he is also a professor of global health. His current research focuses on novel reactors and processors for air, water, and solid waste treatment, and developing new sanitation technologies to reinvent the toilet. He is also co-founder of 374 Water Incorporated, which is commercializing a novel treatment technology developed at Duke. Welcome, both of you. And now we are going to kick off with future Dr. Nahar, soon to be, we'll just call you Dr. Nahar. How about that?
That's kind. It's so good to be with you, future Dr. Clay. And yes, my name is Sarah Nahar, and today I'm calling in from traditional Onondaga land here in Syracuse, New York. It's wonderful to be with you all, so we can really talk about what's going on. And what's going on is that we're in some deep shit. Yes, I'm going to use the word shit today. This is partially because English doesn't have a neutral word for what comes out of our bodies. Feces and excrement sounds very scientific. Poo and pee sound a little childish. When I work with groups, one of the first things I usually do is ask them, what word did you grow up calling the old you? You know, the you that came out of you. And it's kind of spectacular what folks come up with. For all those Ohio folks out there, I think a lot of you are. Some people call it taking the Browns to the Super Bowl. I'll leave that one right there. But there's a lot of euphemism. And if our chat was open, I would have us fill it with like what we learned growing up about our daily discarded resources. Because in many ways today, we'll talk about how waste is really not a waste. For in nature, of which we are a part, there is no waste. There are discarded resources, and every being discards. So there's no need to have shame about discarding, but it's about what happens with what we give off and how can that be safely reintegrated so we can be a part of nature that doesn't double deplete, depleting by eating and then depleting again by not returning our leftover nutrients to the watershed where we got it from. Instead, pushing it downriver often onto people and fish and plants that live there. So I'll use a range of words and just invite you to bear with me in that. And as we talk about this question of poop, it doesn't need to displace all of the rest of our concerns about the climate. In fact, they go hand in hand. I study a lot of food justice as well. And part of that, I think, is just because I actually work on the back end of food justice. Food justice is all about how different forms of nutrients get to our mouths, get to the table where we're at. All of the different issues that are embedded there. But there is a whole poop loop. The food just doesn't stop when it gets to us, it moves through us. And so we need to think in our work on climate justice, not only how we are consumers of products or of processes, but also producers. So the way that I see defecatory justice, or thinking about our bodies in terms of climate justice and what we produce, has a lot to do with everything else that we already care about. And now really bringing that into our bodies and seeing how we're contributing. The other piece of this that I find that is important is it's not just about us individually shifting to all use composting toilet. It's an issue of organizing on the municipal and larger scale levels as well. What I mean by that is, as we think about what we do with our poop, it's not only our individual responsibility. This is similar with other climate issues, but also responsibility of what we do together. So as Melinda introed it, right now our poop is piling up in landfills, being incinerated, creating more greenhouse gases, or like I said, flowing downstream and really messing up the ecosystems there. So being one of the only animals that doesn't replenish its ecosystem sets us up for some engineering challenges. And I'm really excited for Marc's slides that are coming, that are looking directly at how we deal with our shit. My work has a lot to do with being willing to even encounter it, because we're told not to use bathroom words in public in dominant Western culture. It's a taboo topic. Part of this has to do with the legacy of Christian dominance and hegemony that has created many separations and many hierarchical ways of thinking about ourselves. So the more civilized you are, the further away you can put all of your trash, all of your discarded resources. But what we know is that there is no away. Despite the journeys that are happening to colonize Mars, there is no planet B. And if at seminary you all are studying that God loves this planet, then we should as well, and really understand how us finding ways to cycle in health, not only in our daily death, I like to call poop, that is the old you going like coming out, but in our full lives as well. How can we be integrated and return to be that ha'adamah, the fertile soil out of which we were created and the fertile soil with which we can return. So thinking about ecological loops is an invitation to think about eschatology, to think about how we understand the end times. And I like to say beginning with the end in mind, because there's actually not so much of a gap between eschatology and scatology, but paying attention to how we imagine apocalypses and change. If we have a theology that says Earth is passing away, then we don't need to worry about it. But if we have a theology that's like Earth is the heavenly womb that we are designed to roam, then being here now and dealing with our shit becomes absolutely important, literally and metaphorically. Other things that we inherit from a history of Christian hegemony can have to do with the idea that the body is a shame, and what comes out of the body, our farts, our smelly armpits, our spit, stuff with sex, that all of that is what we shouldn't talk about and hide away and feel bad about. But as it says in 1 Corinthians 12, all parts of the body are necessary for its full functioning. And those that are considered weaker are actually have great importance. And when those weaker parts are not taken care of, the whole body is a mess. If you all have ever suffered diarrhea or constipation, you know what I'm talking about. So the importance of paying attention to the whole body and to not have shame, rather to stay connected with all of those parts of ourselves is absolutely crucial. I want to share a prayer from Judaism, and it's called the Asher Yatzar. And it's a prayer said upon leaving the bathroom. It's part of the morning blessings that are said, because often people wake up and then, head to the bathroom. And so there's also a blessing for when you open your eyes for the first time, and another one for when your feet touch the ground for the first time. And it goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, ruach haolam. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who formed humans with wisdom and created us with openings and hollows and tubes. It is clear as I stand in the presence of your glorious throne that if one of the tubes were ruptured or if one of them were blocked, it would be impossible to stand before you and praise you for any length of time. Blessed are you, Adonai, who heals all flesh and acts wondrously. Many Orthodox folks today still say this prayer, as well as others. Find new ways to be thankful and to make holy this moment of elimination. So if nothing else, I'd invite you to say thank you when you are in the bathroom. Say thank you even to the flush toilet. Though this waterborne freshwater flush toilet is not the long-term solution for what we will need on this planet at all, because it uses so much fresh water, the appliance that uses the most in a household. It is a genius medical invention. It helps create separation and boundaries where those are needed. But again, the best way to handle our poop will be to treat it and connect with it as close to the site where it exited as possible, instead of this idea of sending it as far away as possible.
Yeah, to other states even.
Yeah. There's some stories about that. And I think that I will close with the story of the first time that I met a composting toilet. I had a chance to use one while camping as a part of a theological carnival that was looking at how the elements of earth and air and water and fire moved through the biblical text to speak to this ecological moment. And so we had a fossil fuel-free kitchen, and we lived in tents for a month, and then we had a compost toilet. And the first time I went, I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. I do not, no. I was disgusted. But at some point, if you got to go, you got to go. So you just go. And after a month of this, then we had a chance to transport our poop in sealed buckets all the way to the farm where it was being used for human manure to grow flowers, to grow orchard plants, trees, grapes, apples. And I saw how my human manure could be reintegrated. And I had a conversion, a metanoia, a teshuvah, a turning around and recognizing that I needed, that I had all sorts of theology that could help me understand how my life could be a part of an ecological loop. And I felt that in my gut. And I made it my life goal to try to not have to poop in fresh water anymore. And so that is what has taken me on this journey to continue studying defecatory justice and how what moves through our bodies can be reintegrated, as well as understanding that there's an indispensability of all people, animals, plants, and everything on this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nahar. And now, while we're giving Dr. Deshusses an opportunity to put his slides up, I want to also welcome Dr. Allison, who is a professor at the California Institute for Integral Studies. Hello, I'm glad that you could make it. I'm just going to briefly go over some of your bio. It says Dr. Allison research and teaching explores connections between religion, ethics, and environmental practice, with particular attention to biodiversity, waste, ecological place, and climate change. So I'm glad that you could make it.
I do apologize for the Zoom trouble.
Oh, it's okay. It happens. So we all had problems, actually. So without further ado, welcome, Marc. We are so excited that you are here to talk about your work, all of the things that you've done in environmental engineering, and specifically around waste and sanitation. So
thank you.
Oh,
Can you hear me okay?
yes.
Sound is good. And you can see my title slide, right? All right, so we're all set. I mean, it was fascinating to hear you, Sarah, and hear you talk about the poop and your passion and the harmony that we should have around the topic. I'm an engineer. As Yolanda introduced me kindly, I'm a professor at Duke University. I'm also an entrepreneur. I co-founded a company to bring some of the discoveries that are done in my lab to affect the lives of people, because this is why I'm an engineer. I like to solve problems. And you see in the center of this slide, it says engineering to save lives. And this is what is driving my motivations to invent things and develop new mousetraps, new contraptions, new things that do impact in the lives of people. I'm a chemical engineer. I was educated in Switzerland. I was actually born in Buffalo, New York. So, and when it came to pick a topic, I chose environmental engineering because, again, I think it is important to try and make an impact. And so I developed new things to treat air, water, compost, solid waste, all kinds of waste and things. And sanitation has been one of my passions in the past 10 years or so. So the pictures you see here are different pictures from my research, my lab group, and different projects. But for tonight, I'm going to focus on the sanitation aspect. And so there's going to be a little bit of technical things. I'll share a little bit of science because I'm an engineer. That's what we do. We work with numbers and that's my passion. So starting with a bit of a graphic picture, but I think after Sarah's introduction, I'm very comfortable. We're going to talk about poop. We're going to talk about the fact that there are 2.6 billion people on this planet who do not have a decent toilet. and 1 billion people practice open defecation each day. And this is affecting women and girls and minorities more than others. It's also then related to social justice. I will show you, just having a toilet is not everything, because in 2015, the Sustainable Development Goals were the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then they focused on not the toilet, but on the fact that the waste from the toilet needs to be treated, otherwise it goes in the environment untreated. And this is an incredible number. The waste of 4.5 billion people ends up in the environment untreated. So it's a majority of the population in the world. And to illustrate that, I have this diagram. It's an SFD, and I wonder if anyone in the audience has seen something like that and might guess what an SFD is. I'm going to give you the answer. It's a shit flow diagram. And what we're doing is we're following the brown arrows. And this is for not a small city. It's the city of Dhaka in Bangladesh. What we see is that 99% of the people in Dhaka have a toilet. Only 1% defecate. So we say, hooray, it's working. But no, if you follow the arrows, the leakages, latrines unsafely emptied and discharged, it's only 2% of the fecal waste that is safely disposed. 98% is unsafely disposed. And this is the problem that I'm trying to address. I'm trying to find solutions to reduce this, and the Sustainable Development Goal 6 addresses that. That's linked to the water and sanitation. I'm going to show you some more pictures here. So here's some pictures that I took in South Africa in a kind of middle-class compound. And this is a latrine here. I say ironically, this type of latrine is called a VIP, for ventilated pit latrine. It's because of this pipe. It provides ventilation and it limits the odors in the latrines. But pay attention to the fact, here is a bassinet here, and they may be cleaning dishes or doing laundry. And look at this handle here. We'll lift the handle in a minute and see what's underneath. But the toilet is really clean. This is a compound, again, and might be kids playing, but there's very close potential contact of people with fecal matter. And fecal matter has nutrients and good properties, but it contains also pathogens. That's what we need to try and eliminate. And so let's lift the handle, and what do we see? Well, it's a pit latrine, and the waste accumulates there, the fecal waste. And then what happens when the pit is full? Someone comes and empties it. Then where does it end? Quite often it ends in waterways. In 100 yards downstream, there might be kids playing. The same water might be used for household purposes. And along the way between the household and this river, there might be leakages. And this has consequences. On this diagram, we're showing the cause of death in low-income countries. And we see that diarrheal diseases is the number 2 cause of death in people. If we look at this for high-income country, we see we die from heart disease and other things. We don't see diarrheal disease. We see that this is disproportionately affecting the poor in less developed countries. And so this is driving some of the research that is happening in my lab at Duke. And I'm showing here superimposed on a diagram from the Gates Foundation that shows the toilet and the sanitation value chain, the sanitation chain following, the brown arrows to a safe disposal, through the toilet and the pumping and transport and treatment up to final reuse. And this is what we're aiming for. And I'm just showing where I've done some work in my lab. We've worked on odor control. We've worked on developing a low-tech toilet or transportation and reducing waste volume, and on a treatment system. And so tonight I'm just going to show you a couple of pictures of a low-cost toilet, and I'm going to show you a little bit more in a video of an advanced treatment technology, just to illustrate that, and because I think it's a neat thing to share. But so let's go back to this image and what started some of my research and my approach of solving this problem. You know, you look at this picture, and what do you see? Well, you see waste being discharged in waterways, but others might see other things. There's energy. There's 87 kilowatt hours in that drum. What is it? What does it mean? Maybe it doesn't mean anything to you. Well, it's equivalent to the same energy as 3 gallons of gasoline, or the same energy as in a Tesla battery pack. Or 2 of these drums would satisfy the energy needs of a household in India. And so the question was, can we harness this energy and develop a treatment technology that will sanitize this waste and hopefully recover some of the resources? So after Sarah presented, it started to talk about all the things that is in our poop. I quickly added this slide to be a bit more specific, so a little bit more science. You know, what is in fecal waste? And you can see it's highly variable, but 80% is moisture. And in feces, you have fats and you have carbohydrates and other materials. All in all, it's about 80 grams dry per day. But this is where all the energy is. In urine is about 1 liter, 2 pints per day. It's mostly water, but 36% is of the urea. And that represents about 7 grams of nitrogen per day. The phosphorus, by the way, phosphorus is very, very valuable, is mostly, but nitrogen is here. And again, I'm lucky to, be in an environment where we can be creative, and funding from the Gates Foundation was like, how can we develop processes to treat that waste in a way that is cheap and recover those nutrients and harness this energy. So this is the first project. This is this low-cost toilet that I mentioned, which we called ADPL. ADPL stands for Anaerobic Digestion Pasteurization Latrine. It's a self-sanitizing toilet. So it's a low-end toilet to eliminate the pathogens and do partial treatment. So the idea here is that we have a toilet with very minimal flush. Let's not dilute our waste. And then so we're telling people after using the toilet to not flush after they pee, and to have what is called a pour flush. You have a can of 1 liter and pour 1 liter into the flush after they poop. And it goes into a vat, which we call an anaerobic digester. This is an engineered system that produces biogas. Biogas is very similar to what you have in your stove. And then what do? We harness this biogas, and then we burn it in an engineered system that will pasteurize the waste. And sophisticated control and energy recovery. And by pasteurizing, we kill the bacteria, we kill the virus. And what comes out is fit for reuse as a fertilizer. And so we developed the concept in the lab, and then we're lucky to be able to put some prototypes in the field. So I am the lucky owner of toilets in Kenya. And this is one of my PhD students working with locals, and you can see the treatment. So we have 3 toilet stalls, and it all feeds into the digester, which is a gray box here, and these are the controls. And the system was moved, but when the system was operational for a good 5 years, I could follow on my phone, and I could know exactly the status of the system, because the world is connected. These are systems in the Philippines, and we also had India. And so through these toilets, they're very simple. We're able to harness the energy and recover resources. The second project is much more high tech, and this is the one. This is a technology that we're commercializing through this venture that I mentioned, and it's a neighborhood system. And the idea here is to be able to recover resources in a containerized system and treat the waste and return fertilizer for local reuse, and produce hot water for showers or laundry, and being able to do that in a sort of loop. Sometimes we call it the circular economy. And what we're using is a technology called supercritical water oxidation. So I know, it sounds magic, and sometimes you look at it and it's very, very magic, but here's how it works. Oftentimes I call it the pressure cooker on steroids, because what we do is we take any sort of waste, organic, we add air and then we heat it and we compress it. But why is it the pressure cooker on steroids? It's because it's 240 times the atmospheric pressure. Then 374 degrees C is 705 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's pretty high temperature, but it's roughly equivalent to what you have in a high performance diesel engine. And in a matter of seconds, you have clean water, and you convert the organics into CO2, but you can recover nutrients and heat, and then you convert that heat to electricity. And so we build a prototype at scale. And so you can see here, this is on the campus of Duke University, the system, and it's an industrial grade system. It can treat the waste of 1,000 people. And so when we do experiments with waste, with fecal sludges, this is not wastewater. These are sludges. These are thick slurries. This is what we get, clean water coming out. This is one of my researchers. And you see, the water is a little turbid. The mineral nutrients are in suspension, but they will settle. I'm going to show a quick video here. It's probably just less than a minute, so hopefully it works. But this is a run where we were just showing the capability of the unit. We called it party poop because it was Halloween, actually. We added plastics. People worry about microplastics these days into biosolids. These are fecal residues. We're adding wastewater to make it a slurry. This is fat, oil, and grease. Restaurants discharge a lot of that, and actually it clogs sewers and drains. Here you can see how we mix it. This manual in this unit, because it's an R&D unit. And we're pouring that into the hopper. And so you can see what enters these units. So this is what we treat. And, you get a sense of what it looks like. And through our process, you'll see what comes out at the end. And you can see it is clean water. It is clean water. So it's a very transformative technology. It's jaw-dropping when you see it running. And it takes just a few seconds. I mean, the process from start to finish with heating takes a little longer, but the reaction itself is just a couple seconds, 4 seconds. And so this is my last slide. I mentioned this venture. I love to see the things that are developed in my lab go out in the field and become a reality. We know that our supercritical water oxidation process can treat all kinds of waste, animal waste, chemical waste, but you might have heard of PFAS. We also destroy PFAS, and we can do that in a sustainable way, recovering resources. That's why I put my money where my mouth is, and we incorporated 374 water, and we're commercializing those systems. So that's my last slide. I'm going to stop here. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about my passion. I'm going to pass the baton back to Ilonda, and look forward to more discussions as we proceed with the panel.
Well, Marc, I have to tell you that I wanted to both cry and just jump for joy at your slides and at the work that you've been doing with is it 375? Or?
Yeah, 374. I mean, the development of all my research is at University, and 374 water is the commercial venture. Yes. Yeah. Thank you for those words. Thank you very much.
Yes. And so now, without further ado, we have Dr. Allison. Welcome. And I'm also excited at your presentation. I know that your specialty is in religion and ecology, and that you have done a lot of research on waste. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the type of connections that you'll offer us in rethinking waste.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks so much for that welcome. And again, thank you for your patience while I got disentangled from Zoom. I'm really happy to be here with you all this evening. And I think that my presentation follows on the previous two in some interesting ways. So I want to talk about rethinking waste from refused to reincarnated. And as Sarah pointed out already, religions do tend to create and monitor boundaries between what's pure and impure, the pristine separated from the polluted, the valuable separated from the abject. And while folks who study religion might think that these issues of ritual or symbolic purity and pollution are categorically distinct from issues of material pollution, litter, and waste, the anthropologist Mary Douglas has argued that actually these are the same types of issues, and that efforts to dispel dirt are efforts to create order and monitor and maintain the boundaries of society. And so with that insight, I think taking a deeper look at the role of religions in creating, understanding, and addressing the material remnants of human societies can provide insights for addressing waste. And as Alanda mentioned, my research on this topic took place in Bhutan, a Himalayan kingdom stretching across the mountains between India and the Tibetan portion of China. And it's known for its rich Vajrayana Buddhist cultural traditions. It's the only remaining Buddhist kingdom in the world. The entire kingdom is considered to be a sacred and blessed place because of the activity of Guru Rinpoche, a great Buddhist saint who introduced Buddhism to Bhutan in the 8th century. Bhutan also has extensive forest cover, as you can see here. More than 70% of the land is under forest cover. More than half of the country is protected in parks, protected areas, and wildlife corridors, which means that Bhutan is a carbon neutral country, or a carbon negative country even, absorbing more carbon than it emits. So it's a pretty special place. And tourists are really attracted because of the cultural heritage, as well as the biological diversity and the opportunities for outdoor adventure. In 2019, before the pandemic, as many as 300,000 tourists visited Bhutan, providing $88 million in foreign exchange, which is important in a moment. But at the same time, in the early 2000s, uncontrolled household waste emerged as a really significant problem, and it threatened Bhutan's identity as a clean and green destination, as well as threatening human and wildlife health. This problem arose because of the lack of management systems. As recently as the 1990s, an estimated 90% of the Bhutanese populace was rural subsistence farmers on small, widely dispersed farms where most household materials were biodegradable. So, for example, in these images, you can see how villages are pretty much embedded in the forest, and field and forest contribute both to the production and decomposition and regeneration of materials that villagers use in their daily lives. So it's that full cycle that Marc was just speaking of. And in fact, here's that slide of the full cycle where materials in an organic system, materials decay, they become food for other organisms, new organisms grow and are used or eaten by humans or other organisms, and it continues as a cycle. So for much of Bhutan's history, these rural subsistence farmers were participating intimately in the cycle, and they were embedded in the metabolism of the landscape. They were part of the metabolism of the landscape. But with the introduction of these new exogenous manufactured materials, which were introduced when India, which is Bhutan's largest trading partner, liberalized its economy in 1991. Suddenly there was more access to manufactured materials. And this created a waste dilemma that threatened Bhutan's tourist status as this clean and green destination, and also, as I said, threatened human health. So there was a rift from the metabolism in the landscape or with the landscape. And local officials really didn't know what to do. Local health workers advised people to burn their garbage in these waste pits that you can see on the screen. But the Bhutanese villagers really did have a habit of reusing materials. So they would save bottles to fill with homebrewed alcohol, for example, or cooking oil. But it was, as I said, it was quite a problem because this, as we've already heard this industrial life cycle depends on materials being discarded and going away. But we all know there's no away. So this unidirectional material life cycle was introduced into Bhutan at that time, disrupting the previous more organic life cycle. And so based on my fieldwork in Bhutan, I want to discuss some of the ways that studying Bhutan's culture and religion provided greater insight into the waste dilemma that I just described. And first, I want to put this in the context of what's called discard studies, which examines the social and cultural interpretation of waste. And I think Sarah's absolutely in discard studies. Perhaps she mentioned that already. So decisions to discard items perform social and cultural work, according to theorists in this area. Waste materials have both temporal and spatial aspects that need to be considered. Efforts to dispel that which is undesirable are efforts to control social and material order, and concepts of waste, garbage, and refuse perform social work, maintaining these social boundaries. So this all points to the idea that waste is inherently a social, relational, contextual designation, and both the previous presentations have really pointed that out, and it's really shaped by time, place, and society. So just to take a really vivid example, among the Dogon people of Mali, in their recycled cosmology, many substances that folks in the United States might consider disgusting or abhorrent, like smoke, food residue, and excrement, are considered to be signs of abundance and stability and vitality, and they're not considered disgusting. So that, I think that really shows the contextual and social nature of waste. And in the classic definition of Mary Douglas, the anthropologist, she said waste is matter out of place, and it has the ability to contaminate, which becomes important in a moment. So these material qualities, social symbolism, economic factors, and morality all come together in definitions of what is waste. And sometimes this complex, multivalent perception of waste really contrasts with maybe a more managerial or technocratic materialist approach to defining waste, as for example, in this piece of text from a government policy on waste management in Bhutan, when they were just trying to figure out waste management policies. They said waste is what's produced by household activities like sweeping, food preparation, fuel, burning, gardening, but it's not really defined. And another question is, do these materials have contaminating ability? Do they offend people? Are people wanting to be put them at a remove? And so one thing that I found out in my interviews was that plastic wrappings and packaging were not at all considered to be offensive or contaminating. Quite the contrary, they're shiny, they're slippery, they're smooth. And people said, like, this is not dirty. This is not a dirty, upsetting substance. It's clean, actually. And so it doesn't bother us. And so that was one place where there was a disjuncture between what the government was trying to get people to do and what people's perceptions really were. On the other hand, villagers were concerned about a type of moral pollution that they called drib that could disrupt the moral order and offend local deities. So engaging with those kind of moral concerns might have gotten more traction. So in this context, I share just a very brief case study of the Samdrak Jankar Institute initiative, which was a project, it continues, a project to improve rural livelihoods and reduce rural to urban migration in one of the poorest and most remote districts of Bhutan. It was created by a revered Buddhist teacher, and with the overall idea of improving rural livelihoods and improving self-reliance. But one of the major initiatives of this project was to develop small-scale and low-cost waste collection, recycling, reusing, and upcycling businesses that would promote zero waste. And so he drew on the Bhutanese tradition of artistry and craft and weaving, and brought in an artist to help people figure out how to reuse plastic material to weave these baskets and bags that you see here, which are ubiquitous in Bhutan. And when I first went there, were woven out of so-called virgin materials. People would buy these long spools of plastic thread to weave these bags. Now they're woven out of recycled material. And those non-contaminating shiny wrappers, they were perfect for weaving into these kind of bags and baskets. And so this project is at the intersection of religion and waste management. As I said, it was created by a revered Buddhist teacher, Dzongsar Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche, who is understood to be a reincarnated teacher, a tulku, who's understood to have been the return of a 19th century great Buddhist teacher. And he is, Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche, is renowned for his numerous charitable efforts and efforts to promote the Buddhist Dharma around the world. He has written a number of books. He's made some critically acclaimed popular films that carry a Buddhist message. And he's really drawn on the deep wellspring of Buddhist culture in Bhutan. While many religions separate the pure from impure, Vajrayana Buddhism recognizes the importance of sensory experience and teaches to try to overcome negative feelings or aversions and try to dissolve dualistic perceptions through wisdom and skillful means to transform any so-called so appearing obstacle on the path into a tool and a step towards enlightenment. And so here at one of the Buddhist training institutes in that southern district of Bhutan, they've really emphasized both waste management and Buddhist training. And right outside the institute is a big sign that says, "Say no to plastic." And then there's also a picture of a person in meditation. And this image came up on their Facebook page actually just last week as I was preparing this program. So it's very fortuitous. And the Rinpoche has taken a very playful approach also to this idea of religion and waste management. He's proposed that he might send monks across Bhutan to beg not for money or food, which would normally be their approach, but to beg for garbage. He said he wants to make a garbage chorten, which is a Buddhist monument that's shaped sort of like a dome, to encourage people to take a closer look at their waste, as we've heard in both of the previous presentations. So this project has really linked religion and waste management. Another way they've done that is to promote zero waste offerings at their rituals and festivals that occur quite frequently, and people are to bring gifts to put on the altar, which historically was what you see on the screen. And then there was a movement away to more packaged and manufactured items, and they've helped people return to their roots by making culturally sustainable zero waste offerings at these rituals. So in identifying new uses for discarded materials, Dzongsar Khyentse Rinpoche's project has restored value to the material world it's reincorporated waste materials into the cycle of life, connected them into that organic cycle rather than the unidirectional away cycle. And it's helped households find new lives for waste materials to reincarnate their waste materials into new useful items. So this organic cycle again, but really drawing on Buddhist values and practices, as well as the artisanal practices of Bhutan, the weaving practices, the creative artistry. And most importantly, the Rinpoche has helped people rethink waste and identify value in that which has been discarded to turn it from refuse into useful material. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Allison. You know, context makes all the difference. And when you really brought out the ways in which in Bhutan, waste is even thought of differently, that, you know, I had some people say, why are you doing this thing on waste? I don't even want to talk about it, you know? And so, so to see that in a different context, it's not even that big a deal to talk about. And so I saw we had a few questions, but I saw also that those questions were answered. So I have a few questions for our panelists, but do you have questions for each other first? I want to give you an opportunity to ask each other questions.
I have a quick question for Marc. I was curious about the blue glitter in the poop, like whether that was for fun or whether that did something in the experiment or in the process.
Yeah, so this run, we actually did this run on Halloween, and we wanted to showcase the fact that this technology can handle just about anything. And that's why, you know, we use biosolids, which is a residue after the end of water treatment. And we added glitter because today people are concerned about microplastics and fat, oil, and grease and others. And it's true that once I showed this video and someone said, well, aren't you concerned you're going to create a shortage of glitter? How much glitter do you need to run the unit? And I'm like, wait, no, this is just to show you put glitter in there and glitter vanishes just like everything else. So imagine what it does to viruses and microbes, and the glitter is gone. So the glitter was just to showcase that you know, people worry about fibers, textiles, and things, microplastics and hormones and emerging contaminants and all these things. We also had and just to showcase it, it goes away just like anything else. We had a demo day where we had people throw handfuls of pills, Advils and Tylenol and others. And we analyze it and people are realizing strength of that's the glitter story.
Great.
The kids are fine, you know, there's not going to be a shortage of glitter because the crazy Duke professor.
Thank goodness, with Halloween coming up.
Yes. You know, what I loved in both of your presentations is the fact that the human factor and the social aspect. And I was reminded by this, especially when Elizabeth, when you talked about the fact that we engineers, we need to develop solutions, but they need to be appropriate. They need to be context appropriate. And then we just don't, I mean, we shouldn't have the arrogance of thinking that just because we have the best blue container, people are going to use it. It needs to be adapted. And adoption of novel technologies is something that we have much to learn. The engineers, we have to work with people like you on the ground and learn from the communities to make sure that we are you know, we're doing it right. I really enjoyed hearing from both of you.
Absolutely, Marc. There are other stories about the toilets. Many people were very happy to have outhouses in the rural areas, and that was a really big improvement in hygiene for the rural areas because, as you pointed out, open defecation was like the norm in rural areas for a long time. But I also heard stories about how, like, when the monsoon rain came, mud would slide down the hill and fill up the toilet, and that was that, you know, and they weren't able to clean it out, and they didn't know what to do with it. And I think there's a lot about cultural appropriateness and sort of finding out how people use toilets in different places, because I mean, you both know people use toilets very differently in different places. And there were definitely like funny stories about how development organizations had come and built all these outhouses, but they were no longer useful for this reason or that reason.
Yeah, they were used
so like, excuse me.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Beyond the evolutionary principle of don't poop where you eat, all the rest is culture. And because people have been doing this practice, shall we call it, pooping and peeing, since time immemorial, there are a lot of ideas that people have. So what is coming next in terms of how we handle the necessity of handling our business within the context of climate catastrophe will likely be a very decentralized solution. It won't be a one size fits all. And it sure enough isn't shipping the European style toilet everywhere. There's hardly enough water for it here, and elsewhere there's just not. It's also very attached to a particular understanding of like coloniality. And so it's often like a decolonization process that people go through as they begin to like return to a squatting position, right? Like the kind of British throne thing that most folks in the global north use now is not even a great way for the body to eliminate. So, you know, if I think about how to like get what I call getting black to the earth, like squatting down and like finding ways to poop in peace, it's going to require not only different technology, but how I think about the technology I'm using. And technology can be something like a shovel and tree cover. Like that's technology all the way up to the type of technology that Marc is suggesting. But we need a range of especially low-tech work that's happening. And I want to point to the work of Soil Haiti, the work of Mosen Guatemala, the work of Sanergy and Sanitation in Kenya, in terms of container-based sanitation alliances that are thinking about LOA in Kenya. I mean, in Madagascar is another one. So it's coming, and if we're willing, we can learn from folks who are on the margins and facing the sanitation crisis, and we can adapt our tech to match theirs. And we're going to have to do this a lot for a lot of other technology as we come to the climate crisis. So, because technology that works for those on the margins can work for those on the center, but those technologies that come out of the center don't work on the margin.
No.
Well, we have had a flurry of questions come through. So our first question is from Miguel Cornejo, who asks, would you say waste unsafely treated in the US, but also in low-income countries, is a religious, economic, or social or political issue?
Yes.
I would say it's all of those.
Yeah. Absolutely a justice issue, an economic and political justice issue, but in so many ways it's also a religious issue, depending on how a particular community conceptualizes waste and purity and pollution and what they want to do to maintain those boundaries.
And you know, I'm also reminded of our current headlines about Jackson, Mississippi,
Yes.
and definitely about how things like race relations and just the neglect of a system, there's so many interlayers there of injustice. And, you know, when people think of environmental racism, they often think of the impact it has on people of color. But I always say that you have to also think of these spaces which are free from this waste, who have sent it to these other communities. It's not that one happens without the other. So if you could say a little bit more on that topic, any of you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
you know, I think the thing that's cool in the Samdak Jankar initiative is that they're dealing with household waste right there in that community. And I mean, it's very small scale, but this is just like to create ideas, right? Like that small community is reworking their waste into useful things that they can use and that they also sell. So rather than sending it somewhere else or trying to send it away.
I mean, Alona, you mentioned Jackson, but I think we should also mention all the street piping that is happening in Alabama or in the South. And for those of you not familiar with what street piping is, this is the absence of any sort of sanitation, where basically there's a straight pipe coming directly from the toilet, the shower, the sinks, and it goes directly in the backyard of people. And the water table is such that whenever it rains, there's no treatment, and so it is disgusting. And whenever there's water, rains or flooding, it floods back into the household, and we know that this disproportionately affects poor people of color, and we don't talk about it, you know. And I mean, God's sakes, this is America. This is 2022.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. Why is it happening?
Why is it happening? Yeah.
This is where I think declaratory justice can be really helpful, because it looks at who is considered disposable, and it fits right with what Dr. Allison was saying about discard. Who is being discarded? Who is being treated like shit? Why do we treat shit like shit when we've heard so much about how valuable it is? And we know that all folks are valuable as well. But what is discarded has a lot to do with the control of the social and material order, which is what Dr. Allison's slide said. And so what does it mean to allow for a situation to get so dire that people now do not have clean drinking water? And those diarrheal diseases that Dr. Deshusses was talking about are sometimes euphemistically called waterborne diseases. But clean water only stays clean if there's not feces in it, or of course, industrial wastewater and field runoff. Basically, I think about paying attention to poop and garbage and trash. I just call it revolution from the bottom up, because when we think about why we have the separation technology that we have, it relates to how our whole society is set up. So looking at, our refuse is just yet another entry point into this broader question of the way that our society is set up. And I'll say, very frankly, it's based on genocide and enslavement. And that already moves us from that circle that Dr. Allison shared about how we can all metabolically live in our environments, to one which seeks to eliminate people who have a deep connection with the land. That is the attempted genocide against Indigenous folks. And it takes away from the land Indigenous West Africans, bringing them over and then using their body and disposing of their bodies. So it should come as no surprise that eventually, when the water supplies start to become contaminated, that these folks are treated like surplus, treated like something that can be discarded. So this is why it's so important to break the taboo early, because Jackson is not the only place where this is happening, as we know. Thank you for mentioning Loudoun County, Alabama. Check out the book Waste, America's Dirty Secret by Catherine Coleman Flowers. And this is a place that the marchers on their way from Selma to Montgomery to march for voting rights back in 1965. They passed through this area. And yet, even with all the gains that they had at that time, still, the Poor People's Campaign came to Knox County, Alabama, says this is where we are going to launch. Just again here in 2018, they launched their work because they said this is a place where people and what they produce has been so discarded that it's toxifying the whole environment. So that's what I want to say about Jackson. Like, that is coming to a city near you. There are combined sewer overflows all across the Midwest all the time. And so as we break the taboo, you just need to talk about it. You can ask, when you flush the toilet, you can think, where are my poop and pee going? Are they being gainfully employed somewhere, like through one of like Marc's machines or something like that? Or are they wreaking havoc on some waterway? And if you don't know, find out. And then work together with others and approach your city officials and say, look, we're ready for resource recovery. We don't want to have a water shortage in 10 or 15 years. We have this amazing resource and it's not being counted. What can we do? So that's an organizing effort that it will take, because it's actually illegal in many places, many cities, to have a composting toilet in your house. You have to be on septic, and those are for reasons of public health. But with universities, you can run pilot projects in finding new ways to do things. So let us use our privilege and our leverage to be able to make change. That's what I like to say. Thank you. I really just went for it there. I appreciate you.
Sarah, we call it flush and forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not flush and forget.
And the water closet, as it's called, is credited by the World Health Organization, I believe, or some organization that looked at which inventions saved the most lives. And it is the water closet. You know, it's not antibiotics, it's not, you know, other, it's the toilet, the modern toilet as we know it. But as you said, and as I realized, you know, we make an enormous dilution and we use clean water as just a vehicle to move things. Another interesting fact is that our wastewater treatment plants are using a lot of energy to take the nitrogen and put it in the air. And then 3 to 5% of the world's electricity, 3 to 5% of the world electricity is spent to capture nitrogen from the air and make nitrogen fertilizer to put on crops so we can produce and pee and poop and produce more nitrogen. And we have to rethink the cycle of nutrients. We have to rethink it in the context of sustainability. We have to rethink water and realize that there are different qualities of water. I would love to have water that has those nutrients to water my yard, but it also has to be done in a safe manner, because, you know, we don't want to start spreading pathogens. We don't want to start spreading pharmaceuticals and other things. So we, you know, we should use science and educate people about what is safe and what is not safe to do, what is reasonable, and also being able to conserve resources.
Right. You know, I think that really brings up the point about the metabolism with the land. Before there were latrines in Bhutan's rural areas, people did practice dispersed defecation, but there's a really low population density.
Yes.
And so those nutrients were actually going back into the soil where they need to be. And certainly as you know, development has continued, there's been an effort to have improved toilets, and as you just pointed out, so many public health benefits. But I do also think there was something about returning the nutrients to the soil that was probably really good for the soil. It just at a very, very low human population density.
Yep. Oh, Ilona, you're on mute. I see you're speaking, but you're on mute.
Thank you for that. I wanted to kind of run these next two questions together. And the first one is from Marilyn Stratford, and she says, what unexpected profound data findings did the speakers find helpful at the end of their studies? And then from Ingrid Wood, we have for Marc, what happens with the chemical waste removed from the poop? Okay, so.
Who's going to go first? Because I can answer the last question. What happened with the chemical waste removed from? I actually was typing the answer. How do you destroy PFAS? And this technology that I showed, supercritical water oxidation, is what we call in my field an advanced oxidation. And what it means that the organics are oxidized or they're mineralized, another term, the most simple and basic elements. So the organics go to CO2 and H2O, CO2 and water. It's almost like burning in water, but of course it's not burning, but the reactions are similar chemically, is that they react with oxidant species, and we use air, but it's oxygen in the air. And then you oxidize them to and water. In the particular case of PFAS, it's the fluorine atoms which are make these PFAS extremely stable. That's why they call the forever chemicals. And the carbon to fluorine bond, the chemistry refresher, carbon to fluorine bond is one of the strongest bonds in chemistry. But the conditions in supercritical water are so intense that this bond gets broken, and we recover fluoride, the fluorine as fluoride. The fluoride is what's in your toothpaste, that's what is added to your drinking water. But we've proved that break those PFAS and they are destroyed. It's really not just removal and putting them in a landfill or somewhere, it's making the problem go away. Thank you for that great question.
So what have you found in your data that was unexpected, in any of you, like in your research?
I think the most unexpected thing for me in this particular topic was finding out that wrappers and packaging were not dirty. I mean, having grown up in the 70s, give a hoot, don't pollute. I don't know if anyone remembers that. But we were, trained not to throw things out of the car windows. And there was all this emphasis on not littering. And that becomes so deeply ingrained. And so to try to enter this different worldview, or to try to learn about this different worldview that says, that shiny thing, that doesn't disturb me at all. What I'm disturbed about is this ritual pollution that may upset our local deity and cause problems for our village. That's the thing we need to be concerned about. Was really interesting and took some time to get my head around. And then to sort of square that with the Bhutanese government's efforts to control household waste based on a more Euro-American narrative of personal responsibility and give a hoot and don't pollute, that just didn't connect with rural villagers was really interesting and took quite a lot of time to unravel. So I think what I want to really present here is the importance of understanding different cultural contexts and how people interpret their waste and garbage and refuse in those contexts. Like I know also in India, there's some places where depending on social caste, someone can't use the bathroom before or after someone else because someone's poop can't land on the poop of a higher caste person. I mean, we can definitely try to disassemble caste, but if that exists, then bathrooms can't be used by everyone because you can't have a low caste person going and pooping on top of the poop of a high caste person, for example. And so that's just a really different understanding of waste and people's relation to it than we might be familiar with in the US.
Not so different. I was thinking of the signs for the bathrooms and the fountains and all of the segregated.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Sarah,
think-
you were.
Yeah, I think one surprise that I have is like that this panel exists. So I'm grateful to like the International Society for Religion, Nature, and Culture for like bringing us all together, and that the work on this has been so embraced. And it makes so much sense in a way though, because like everybody poops. And so I thought I didn't know what I was going to say at any PhD party when people are talking about what they're into and they're like, Sarah, what are you studying? And I would be like, yeah. But it has been a conversation starter, not a conversation ender. And so that's been really, really exciting. Kind of a short form, I say it now, is I study the toilet, both the ritual and the receptacle. And thinking about the ways in which our mundane actions, like it's such a way that I want to get free. And yet, if I'm going to like continue with my day, I'm still quite complicit in this system of flush and forget. And so thinking about the ways in which I can activate my compassion, both for myself as an actor in this overwhelming interlocking system of oppression, and also as an agent of change. And so that's been like a surprise for me, the personal process throughout it. Also, for all the folks who are studying Greek in seminary there, just want you to know that there's an etymological connection between the words for bowels and the words for compassion in biblical Greek. So compassion is like to be moved with your inward parts. And that's just a recognition that like, it's not all in the intellect, but like really getting in touch with our gut instincts and how they move us to go ahead and cut through the crap, let's say, and like be about the work that we are to be about in the world. So that's been a surprise. And I think maybe I'll just say in conclusion, or are we not to concluding thoughts yet?
Well, not quite yet, because
Okay.
it's Marc's turn.
Interesting. You know, for me, sharing my experience, to see how people could get excited about poop and about the fertilizer we're producing. I think, you know, going back to around 2015 is when we installed our first 3 toilets in Kenya. And people were super excited. The grand opening was attended by all the people in compound. It was the big celebration. And a couple of things. I mean, for me, I had done a lot of industrial pollution or pollution control and the things. It was always like, yeah, I'm doing my thing and I'm happy to see it being deployed. But, you know, I started to realize that I had a project and I had a toilet and it's very personal to these people. And I'm like, wait a second, you better not screw up. Your toilets better work, Marc, because, you know, there's some people who count on it to work and they want to see, you know, they want to have a better toilet. There was a point where we had to service it and we had to close it for a week and they had to go back to the smelly latrines. We're complaining. It's like, no, we love your toilet. And I'm like, wow, you know, this is a big responsibility. But going back to the question, the enthusiasm of the people, it's like, well, can we have this? And how much fertilizer and, you know, how they got involved and telling me that, yeah, we rethink the toilet in a way that can be more sustainable, can return nutrients, and it's not for everywhere. You know, there's some places where it's too dense, but in peri-urban, there's a lot can be done, and you know, I hope that my solutions will contribute. That's why I'm passionate about it.
Well, before we have concluding thoughts, I want to thank all of you for agreeing to do this panel. I have been talking about this panel for a year. And I was so excited when the 3 of you agreed to participate. Then I talked about it even more to everyone I knew. We are going to do this panel on poop. I'm so excited. And so I want to give all of you an opportunity to do your concluding thoughts on this unique panel all about waste.
Going for
I could briefly answer and also briefly answer this question that remains in the chat. The question was about the whether tourists were contributing to waste in Bhutan, and tourists certainly do, although for a variety of reasons, many of the tourists are fairly wealthy older individuals from developed countries who probably have middle class American habits of looking for a trash can at least for their waste. And one of the big issues that the Bhutanese government was trying to deal with was just dispersed disposal everywhere. So I think that tourists were not as much of a problem at that time, but tourists are resource heavy for sure, and do bring lots of packaged goods. So kind of generate, and actually here's the story from my fieldwork. I was staying in a guest house in a rural area that had a little waste basket. So I put my tissues and Q-tips and what have you in there. And then one day I took a walk and voila, that's where they were on the hill behind the guest house. And so it was a real lesson, in just sort of how resource intensive I am as a North American. And, if I hadn't been using all those disposable items, they wouldn't have been thrown away. So maybe that's the kind of thing I want to leave that with, is just like trying to cultivate some personal awareness about all the disposable items that I use in my daily life, and whether they're necessary or not, or what other options there might be.
Yeah, I mean, my concluding thoughts. I'm thrilled along that you convened this panel, and I really enjoyed, being surrounded by geeks all the time. I enjoyed being in different kinds of geeks, and I got inspired by Sarah and Elizabeth about their work. My thoughts of this is like, I work to develop technologies, and my hope is that we are able to put them where they can have impact on people's lives, and be just a little something to address, poverty, sanitation, and lives of people. That's why I get up every day, and I'm excited about the work that I do.
Well, thank you both. In conclusion, I wanted to share a story that I learned from a First Nation leader, Indigenous person in Canada, speaking with us as we were doing accompaniment. And he said to us, we were with Christian peacemaker teams at the time, an organization that sends trained teams of people to work alongside communities as they nonviolently resist oppression. And he said, you Christians say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And we say yes to that, but we also have always recognized that humans aren't the only one in that flow. It's deeper than that, he said. He said, we say, do unto those downstream as you would have those upstream do to you. And so I guess I leave us with the thought of who is downstream of us, and what are they experiencing metaphorically and literally as a result of our disposable heavy society. So what does it mean for us to flush our waste onto them? And who is upstream of you? What do you have to say to them? So this is literally the golden rule translated into our water systems. Thank you.
Bravo! Thank you all so much. This will conclude our digital dialogue on All About Waste, Sanitation, Justice, and Reinventing the Toilet.